and some of the things that we have coming up a little later in the course of the show. Dr. Jonathan Tripp will be here between 8:30 and 9 o'clock this morning from Tripp Family Medicine. If you have a telephone call, feel free to give us a shout. Also, what we're going to be talking about this notion of a new area code in the state of Idaho. Apparently, by 2018, they're simply going to run out of telephone numbers. Where are we going to draw the line? That's a topic I want to mention a little bit later during the course of the program. But I'd like to open up on some details I got from some people yesterday who attended one of the town hall meetings that was conducted in our area by U.S. Senator Mike Crapo. And he has been, I'll give him credit, he's been on the road and attending town hall meetings starting out from New Year's. He has probably done about 75 of these, if not more. I don't have a running count right now, but I know it's very, very high, and he's going to be continuing this over the next couple of weeks. And he had a lot that he talked about during the course of his visit in Filer. Two people clued me in on what was going on, in fact, in Filer. One actually has written about it as well at a publication that she manages. Her name is Vicki Davis. And I'd like to thank the two of them for keeping me up to speed on what was taking place there. Number one, he did talk about the huge debt problems that the United States has. If we get a chance a little later in the program, I'm going to share with you, there is a story out of Forbes today that says we are so underfunded with our promises for various things like Medicaid and Social Security. We're looking at a $72 trillion deficit in those accounts down the road. That's just a figure you can't even get your arms around. But this was one of the things that Senator Crapo happened to talk about while he was there. He also talked a little bit about the Environmental Protection Agency, and as the writer Vicki Davis says, the EPA really is trying to put Idaho farmers out of business. I don't think you can look at that any other way. Now, maybe that's not, quote, the stated goal, but that's what's going to happen if they continue down this road. All the more reason that we have to remove the current people who are in charge of that organization, which is not, of course, accountable to the public. None of these large bureaucratic agencies are. They all run under enabling legislation, and they come up with regulations, which are laws. You know, it's like saying, well, we didn't raise your taxes, but we have a lot of new fees this year. Well, it's the same thing, right? You know, you're taking money out of one pocket or the other. And when it comes to regulations happen to be laws. So he addressed that. But many of the people who were there, and this was the Filer Town Hall is not a big place. There were only seats capacity for 43. So apparently they had all of those seats were filled. And then they had some people who were in standing room. Now, that was just one meeting. He had meetings throughout the day. There were a series of about 8 of these throughout the Magic Valley yesterday, and then there are going to be more today that are taking place. But 43 people showing up in Filer at 9 o'clock in the morning for a town hall meeting is mightily impressive. A lot of times, I remember when I was a young reporter, I would be sent to cover these things, and I would go out and I would show up, and there'd be a congressman or a senator there, and there might be, 7 or 8 people. And they were all the usual suspects. All the people who used to show up to always beg for their specific program. Oh, we won't be able to feed the children if we get cut next year, Senator, and millions will starve. And then if the senator gave them an answer that apparently refuted that, they'd say, well, 100,000 will starve. And then if he refuted that, they'd say, well, 10,000 will starve. And it was the usual run-of-the-mill that you would see at these meetings. And some of the people in the crowd would be there saying, hey, great job. How are the wife and kids? Wonderful to see you. Let me pat you on the back. Here's a campaign contribution. Remember my business when you're back in Washington, please. And that's about it, right? But 43 people showing up. What were they talking about? Well, what has been topic du jour pretty much on this program and throughout this community for the last several months, really since, I think, April when it was first divulged that we are going to be seeing, and now we're down to, the clock is ticking. We're talking about October, so we're less than 2 months away before the people are going to start showing up. The 300 or perhaps more Islamic Syrian refugees expected to be coming to the Magic Valley, as well as around the country, many other places. I just saw Trey Gowdy on television talking on Fox. He is from Spartanburg, South Carolina, congressman from that area, and he's been fighting this as well and saying, we need to know more about this before this actually happens. One of the interesting things that came out of this meeting yesterday, now, every elected politician that I have come across has said, oh, this is a wonderful program and these people make wonderful neighbors. Vote for me. I'm sure that most of them are. I have no issue with that. I have a great many friends who have come here from all over the world. So stop that, will you? The problem here is you've got people in refugee camps, and we don't know who they are, and we're just going to be scooping them up and saying, well, he said he wasn't a terrorist, so we checked his name on the list and sent him over. Somebody in the audience yesterday said, well, why don't we just have a moratorium on this program until we straighten it all out? And with that, this is a surprise, I think, to a great many people, Senator Crapo said I would consider a moratorium. So we've moved, and they're not being shy about admitting that they have been hearing a great deal from constituents on this matter. They've got to be looking at the numbers. They've got to be looking at the numbers someone like Donald Trump is polling, where he's got in some states 1/3 of the Republicans who are surveyed saying they're going to vote for the guy. Why? Because he's speaking truth about these things. It may not matter that he'll ever be, and I think it's a snowball's chance in Hades he'll ever end up president of the United States. But I would think that people can read the tea leaves here in politics and say, hey, you know what? People out there are peeved. I cleaned that up a little bit, I should note. This is a family show. But people are not happy, and we're seeing what you're calling in politics this year a roiling of the American public that doesn't look like it's going to stop. And I'll tell you what, if we can talk about the economic news a little later in the program, good golly, you don't know what might be coming down the pike. And it's not going to get any better if some of these things actually happen. And the trends are not good. So to at least get a senator, a sitting U.S. senator, to say, maybe we should have a moratorium, is a huge departure from where we've been with the usual, oh, America is a country of immigrants, and isn't it wonderful? And even though none of you have any jobs any longer, we're going to import a few million of them, and it'll make just the country even all better. And party affiliation has been irrelevant on that topic because Wall Street has pretty much paved the campaign roads with gold, so these people in both parties, the major parties, will say whatever they can, and it's usually the same thing. It's just program in, and it just gets spit back out that way. But here you have it, one person saying, okay, I'll consider that. Now, how many more people can we get him to introduce legislation? That's the next question. Can he go back to Washington? Can he introduce legislation and get his fellow senators on board with the idea of a moratorium on this? And again, then we can sort it all out. Seems to me that's a fairly good compromise. But then again, certain people in this community wouldn't get all of that government money. Your money. Money that was taken from you when you paid your taxes last April 15th, which then is going to be turned around and go into the food stamps, which will help out the local grocer. He'll be happy with that. Or she. We should be politically correct, shouldn't we? Your grocer may be a she. Some may not know, but that's a story for another day. And then the guy who's going to be renting all of the slum properties, look at that. There's a rent check. And then, of course, the people at the College of Southern Idaho, look at that, money. Yeah. Not their money, but it doesn't matter to them. It's, they feel they're entitled to all of it. So they'll be pushing back against any notion of a moratorium. Now, Colley here yesterday said, you're not doing anything to further the cause. So I went out last night and I burned down a couple of churches, and marched through the streets and beat up a lot of minorities and the like. I hope he feels better. Actually, I was in bed by 7:30, but that's pretty much par for the course for my weeks. We're not talking about some sort of violent, nasty outburst. Nobody wants that. We are talking about having these people hear the public. And I would bet, of course they can't afford to do it, the one-horse newspaper in this town, if they were to actually conduct a serious scientific poll and ask people how they felt about this program, I think it would be it probably would be about 4-1, if not higher, in people in support of a moratorium or ending the program altogether. But at least a moratorium is getting us a little bit more in that direction. And maybe we'll learn something from the liberals, too, because they get what they want through incrementalism. It's like when they said, well, we just want civil unions. Okay, they got that. Well, no, we want marriage equality. They got that. We want your churches shut down. They're getting that. We don't want Christians to be employed. You're going to have to live in tunnels and under bridges. And they'll get that. But maybe it's time we started thinking incrementally too, and a moratorium's a good place to start. It's 8:17. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program by dialing us at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Also, if you're listening to us, I had a caller the other day who was telling me off air that they listen in his office online. I'll tell you, that's a really handy way to do that. And it's a nice, clear signal, obviously, too, as well. But I have friends who are listening, it's amazing, who are listening in various places around the country, in probably a dozen states. And it's a fairly simple thing to do. You go to the website, and there up in the upper right-hand corner in that area, in that region, is an icon that says Listen Live, and you click on that. And it's a fairly simple approach to hearing this program, Top Story with Bill Colley, every morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Some of the other things we're going to be talking about this morning, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I'd like to talk about, if we get a chance at some point, the proposed new area code coming in Idaho. Now, that's not, I grew up in a small town, dairy farming town. You know, it wasn't really small. We did have 2 traffic lights. It wasn't just one. But I grew up in a small dairy farming town, and we were in an area code that covered about an 8-county area in the southwestern corner of New York State. And then one day the telephone company came in, and it might have even been a dozen counties, but the telephone company came in and said, got to change that. And my hometown sat right on the county line, and they drew that line right down the middle. And so to call a friend who I used to be able to call for free, if I wanted to call him and he lived just 5 miles away, I suddenly had to pay long-distance charges. Although in this day and age with cell phones and you know the call anytime, anywhere plan most people have, that really becomes somewhat irrelevant, I suppose. But my question has been, and maybe we can address this a little bit later, where do you draw the line when you come up with a new area code for the state of Idaho? 40% of the people live in that area, directly around Boise and Nampa. 40% of the people in the state are just congregated in that small, tiny region of a couple of counties. So you're going to have to draw a line. I don't know if you draw it east-west, because if you draw it north of there, then it's going to be a little imbalanced, because there aren't a lot of people living north of there. If you draw it a little south again, you get into the same issue. So maybe it's going to be an east-west type of deal, where it'll very narrowly be defined throughout the northern reaches of the state, which is already narrow geographically. Take a look at a map. You'll know what we're talking about, even if you are a public school graduate. But then maybe draw a line down through, and maybe Meridian and everything west of there is one area code, and everything east of there, and you just draw it straight down from the Canadian border all the way down to the state line. Let me know what you think on that one. You can even email me at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com this morning. Dr. Jonathan Tripp will be joining us in about 15 minutes. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. That's on the way this morning on Top Story. You know what we could do when it comes to coming up with a new area code? Maybe just draw a big circle around Sun Valley and Haley, and give it a 0 to start, like a 080, to match like the average IQ in that area. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 74 this morning. It's going to be a hot day, and I got up this morning at 3:30. It was already 76. It's dropped just a little bit, but it'll pop back up, I think, somewhat fast, unless the cloud cover keeps us just boxed in for most of the day, which might not be a bad thing if you don't like a lot of heat. Speaking of that area around Sun Valley and Haley, as you know, I am under pressure to share with you occasionally a rebuttal to our program in the interest of balance here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we've been sharing with you a series of editorials from the opposing view. And once again, it's time for one of those on our program today.
Hello, John Offen here, but call me Jack. Once again, Bill Colley has gone too far. Daily he mocks the President and the EPA. It's as if Mr. Colley is paving the way for our doom and to benefit his Koch brother pals. Saving the planet requires courage, much of which is lacking from red state Americans who hide behind guns and God and an outdated constitution. The future of America and the planet is the alternative. Alternative fuels, to be precise. Many mock the new methods of generation science delivers for us, but I have news for you. Even an electric car can show some muscle climbing a hill. Even if it couldn't, I'll share I know a thing or two about the automobile. My father, perhaps you've heard of Winthrop Offen, dominated road racing in the 1950s and 1960s. Win Offen was a legend on mountainous courses throughout Europe. On summer holidays, I would listen to the crude engines as they struggled going uphill. Then I had a brainstorm. I've been designing my prototype in a converted old ice cream stand in Haley. I'll never forget the day it dawned on me in a cloud of hazy smoke. Oversized rear tires. You see, you can be driving up a mountain, but the rear tires keep your car parallel to sea level. Voila! No strain on the engine, and fuel consumption is eased. So, you see, when we do away with the internal combustion engine, we'll still have plenty of fuel to power our transportation needs. And Father claimed smoking marijuana every day for 50 years would harm my creativity. Bill Colley and his talk show ilk are really the ones blowing nothing but smoke. John P. Offen wrapping it up for today and reminding you, now you know Jack.
I guess we do. 827, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to mention somebody who's been joining our show over the last week who's a little bit easier to take. In fact, yesterday I was served some pepperoni, which was made from grizzly bear, and it was delicious. And it came from the good folks at High Desert Meat Processing, where they process one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you're going to get back. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, Idaho, has over 30 years of experience in the meat business. And we recommend you visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook or read reviews of other customers. Give High Desert Meat Processing a telephone call for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs, 734-9949. Once again, that number, 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats such as jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa. Kielbasa. Breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and much more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. The telephone number once more, 734-9949. We have a telephone caller joining us this morning, and you're up next on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Hey, I just listened to the recording of the opinion from up north a ways. I agree with one part of his statement that his ideas come from a midst of a smoky haze.
Are you talking cigarettes or cigars?
Well, I worked in Sun Valley driving truck up there. I do lighting for a living now, but years ago, there are a lot of good people up there. There's just a lot of, when there's a baby in the room crying and throwing a fit, it overtakes everything else, and that's the percolation you get from that area. But I have to defend the Bellevue, Ketchum, Haley area a little bit. There are a lot of good people up there that are probably laughing right along with us.
Well, I hope they are too. I thank you much for the telephone call. I was talking to some guys who moved some furniture one day, and they were telling me that when they go up to the Sun Valley area and they have to take furniture up, that in a lot of the newer homes up there, the newer construction, you've got winding staircases, and they were breaking down all of the unusual things that happen when they're delivering furniture up there. They didn't tell me, though, about the people they meet, which might have even been a better story. It's 8:30. Dr. Jonathan Tripp on the way from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine, Wednesdays between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Remember, if you have a comment or question for the doctor today, we're going to be talking about imaging, x-rays, CAT scans, and the like. Feel free to give us a shout at 736-0300. That's 736-0300.